and by faking it.
And do you think that this money then actually went to the real space program behind the scenes?
I do.
Yeah,
I do, and I think the people that were working on NASA, and those are the people who are the most upset with me, by the way. I get a lot of emails from people who were working at Rocketdyne and McDonnell Douglas and these companies working for NASA, and they're really angry at me because they say, well, I did all this work, and you're telling me that it was just a big fake. Well, you did do all the work. It's true. You did good work, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But you weren't doing it for Apollo. You were doing it for the secret space program. It's quite brilliant, too.
Yeah. Well, exactly. That's quite interesting. I definitely want to talk more about that. There's one thing about the occult NASA connection that I've been reading about that it's the most obvious one to me, I guess, in that sense. That has to do with the developments that happen at White Sands, specifically JPL, the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. We have people like Jack Parsons and the so-called Babylon Bunch doing some interesting ritual magic connected to the JPL facility and all that as well. That's one of the more obvious ones that I know about. But beyond that, what else is there out there in terms of NASA that are connecting the threads to this the upper elite, the establishment, Jay?
Well, I mean, the most interesting thing, of course, is that the scientists in Germany that developed all of this stuff were all members of a group called the Saturnian Society. And I'm not, we don't really know all that much about the Saturnian Society, but I just find it interesting that, they named the rocket the Saturn V, even though it was going to the moon, which was strange. And but more interesting than that is the obsession that NASA has had with Saturn, and including sending the big ship that's out there now, collecting thousands and thousands of images of Saturn and its moons. And you just got to wonder what's going on. And if you read Ring Makers of Saturn, which is an astonishing book by a scientist here in the United States, Bergson, about the objects that the Voyager photographed in the rings of Saturn during the Voyager flyby, and the things that that they're picking up now, especially on Titan and the hexagonal rings on Saturn and things. You start wondering. You have to wonder what Saturn actually is, and the myths around Saturn and everything are just so interesting. And then you realize at a certain point that this cult is a Saturnian cult. And and if you go into the mythology, you realize that Saturn was really that there's a war, kind of a spiritual war between the followers of Jehovah or Jupiter and the followers of Saturn or Set. Okay, Jehovah means Jupiter, Zeus. The followers of Jehovah, the Christians, the Muslims, and the Jews, are actually following Zeus, because Jehovah is Jove, which translates directly to Zeus. And all they did was they just got rid of all the other gods and made Zeus the primary god. And the same thing with Saturn. Saturn was the god before Jehovah, before the Jovian religions came 3,000 years ago. The people were worshiping Saturn and Set, who is the Egyptian god, and Saturn is time and Chronos and all these things. And you begin thinking that, there's something about Saturn that we haven't quite figured out that they know. Yeah. And I think that Saturn might be some kind of hyperdimensional gateway or something. I'm not sure. I just know that there's things that are going on Saturn which are absolutely mind-boggling, and NASA knows about it. And another interesting thing about this is in 2005, there was a TV series in the United States called Revelations, and it only lasted 6 shows. It was a summer replacement, really wasn't a very good show, and it was financed by the Catholic Church. And in this show, Bill Pullman is a scientist, and there's some beautiful actress, I forget her name. She's playing a nun, believe me, the most beautiful nun you've ever seen. And they're chasing the Antichrist, okay, all over the world, who's about to destroy the world. And in the film, it turns out that the Antichrist has a secret box. And inside, on the front of the box is a picture of Saturn, and there's a moon right next to the picture of Saturn. And Bill Pullman points at the moon, and he says, "It's a black moon." And he says, "What's this?" And the nun says, "That's the black moon of Saturn. That's where the Antichrist lives." Well, this is 1 year after they took the pictures of Iapetus,
right,
okay, which is a black moon, about 6 months after Hoagland came out with his brilliant analysis of Iapetus. And at the very end of the series, they defeat the Antichrist, but, you know, they got to have a sequel because it's a TV show. And so they're standing out on a cliff overlooking the ocean. They won their battle against the Antichrist, blah, blah, blah. And they look up at a star, and the camera zooms into the star. Turns out the star is really Saturn. And the very last shot of the show is this black moon rising over the frame, covering the frame. Okay? So this is all very odd because here's the thing. The place where the black monolith is in the book 2001: A Space Odyssey is on the moon Iapetus. And you start putting this together and you realize that these guys must have had knowledge. These German guys must have had knowledge about Saturn from something. But they knew that there was something about Saturn. Kubrick was going to Saturn in 2001. In the book, they actually go to Saturn. He changed it to Jupiter, said he couldn't make the rings look realistic enough. I don't buy it. I think they came in and they said, no, you can't make it Saturn. It's just too obvious. It's just too clear. You can't have it land on Iapetus because one day we're going to take a picture of Iapetus and they're all going to squawk about the huge coincidences of us, you know, here in 1965, knowing about all this when we're not supposed to know about it. And, you know, or even more intriguing, if my German friends and contacts are right, they had already developed technology by 1961, 62, to actually go out there. And they knew all about it by then.
Arthur C. Clarke probably had some knowledge about this then. Do you think that, because you alluded to earlier that he was part of the inner network there in one way or another, right?
Absolutely. In fact, I'm sure that he and Kubrick and Hermann Oberth and Werner von Braun and some of the more secret Germans that we don't know about that were quite brilliant, well, they sat around in Arthur C. Clarke's apartment drinking brandy and smoking cigars and talking into the night about all this stuff. And Kubrick's this kid practically, right, going, oh my God, you know, what is this, right? And excited and tried to fit it into his scheme of things and got a lot of it in. Another interesting thing is Anthony Burgess was one who wrote Clockwork Orange, was asked one time where he got the idea, and he said he got it from Stanley Kubrick in a conversation in 1964.
Interesting.
So A Clockwork Orange was what happened? Well, maybe Kubrick said, listen, I'm not going to do fake this Apollo moon landing crap because the astronauts will talk eventually, and then we'll all look like idiots. And they showed him how they could get the astronauts not to talk. He saw the Levico technique and told Burgess about it, and then Burgess wrote a book.
I wanted to, when we talked a bit earlier about Buzz Aldrin, he not too long ago made a comment about a monolith found on Phobos. I bet you saw that one, and if so, why is he speaking about that particular thing right now when he couldn't remember basic stuff about the moon? What is he on about now?
Well, I mean, you know, Buzz knows the truth, of course. He knows he didn't go. He knows that there's a secret space program, and he is trying to get us to get us to reveal it so that we can go to Phobos and look at this stuff. And, you know, we've already been to Phobos probably several times, and he knows that too. And so, you know, a lot of these guys are irritated. They were told years and years ago that, yeah, we'll keep a lid on it, you know, for 10 or 15 years, and then we'll release the fact that we have all this technology, and the world will be a better place because we'll have energy that's clean and efficient and all that. And then they never do it. And these guys like Buzz Aldrin and Richard Hoagland and all these other guys are all irritated that, you know, the promises aren't being kept. And so they're pressuring them to release this stuff. But I got news for all of those guys. They are not going to release it, ever. We're not, they don't want us to know about it. They don't want us to have it. And there's basic, you know, reasons for that too.
So I want to talk a little bit more about, I mean, some of the symbolism here in terms of Saturn as well. The Lord of the Rings, right? Representing time, death. You know, in some cases we can see, you know, the Cronus or Saturn with an hourglass and all this as well. It's quite interesting when you get into it, and I even think that there is a hint of this in the most basic, the NASA logo as well. Many people say it's a rocket taking off with this kind of V or U-shaped, but that looks to me like the red rings of Saturn around a blue planet. What do you make of that, Jay?
I completely agree with you, and yeah, the Lord of the Rings. Okay, so here we have J.R.R. Tolkien, who's the only person who can read the books that are in the basement of the Oxford at Oxford. Okay, he's got all these books from Finland and Sweden, and he's the only guy who can actually read them. All right? And he spends hours and hours, hundreds of hours reading all this stuff that's down there. And he writes Lord of the Rings after he's done reading it. Okay? And he says to his friends like C.S. Lewis, he says there's a whole history and we don't even know about it. And he told people in his letters that Lord of the Rings was about Europe 6,500 years ago, that, you know, the Irish were the hobbits and the elves were the Nords, and, you know, he had this whole thing figured out, and he said this is all based on truth, and he would get angry when people said, well, you know, this is all analogy and metaphor, and he would say, no, it isn't analogy and metaphor. This is what I learned from my reading. And one of the things he gets is that there's this Lord of the Rings, like Saturn, and his name is Sauron. And Sauron is obviously, you know, so close to the Mesopotamian dictator Sargon, who invented time, literally invented time. He invented clocks and calendars and schedules and really delivered the world into the linear, monochronic world that we live in right now. The world before that was polychronic, but Sargon created the monochronic world and really thrust us into civilization, if you want to call it that. And so he understands this, Tolkien, and he's trying to show us that the Saturnian power came in and forced us into a kind of slavery, wrecking the planet, destroying the planet, and using up all the energy of the planet for its own devices. We don't really know, reading Lord of the Rings or watching the movies, we don't really know what it is that Sauron is trying to accomplish. Not really. And outside of conquering the world. And what it is he's trying to destroy the elves who know too much and have too much power, and he's trying to trap the earth into into an energy sucking thing, and he's creating half breeds of clones, the orcs and all those